The blood on my kitchen floor was still warm when I realized my dead husband was standing behind me. I spun around, the butcher knife I'd been using to carve the Thanksgiving turkey still clutched in my trembling hand. And there he was, Captain. John Miller, missing in action for 10 years, declared dead for 7, memorialized with a granite headstone I visited every Sunday after church. Except now he was breathing in my doorway like some impossible ghost made flesh. "Hello, Claire," he said, his voice hoarse and unfamiliar, aged by whatever hell had swallowed him in the mountains of Afghanistan. The knife clattered to the floor. My son Tommy, now 15 and taller than his father had ever been, emerged from the living room where he'd been watching football, took one look at the stranger in our kitchen and whispered, "Dad." John's eyes, those same green eyes I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago, filled with tears as he looked at the boy who'd been 5 when he'd shipped out for his final deployment. Tommy had grown up with only photographs and my stories, had learned to be the man of the house while waiting for a father who would never come home, except he had come home. "You're dead," I managed to choke out, my voice sounding foreign in my own ears. "They gave me your dog tags. I buried an empty coffin. There's a memorial with your name. I know." John stepped closer and I could see the scars now, dozens of them, crisscrossing his face and neck like a road map of suffering. His left hand was missing 2 fingers. When he moved, he favored his right leg. "I've been watching. I've seen you at the cemetery. I've seen Tommy at school. I've been..." He paused, searching for words. "I've been trying to figure out how to come back to the living." The absurdity of it hit me like a physical blow. For 10 years, I'd built a life around his absence. I'd raised our son alone, worked 2 jobs to keep the house, dated exactly 3 times before deciding that no one could replace John Miller. I'd become the widow who turned tragedy into strength, the single mother who proved that love could transcend death. And now he was standing in my kitchen, destroying everything I'd built with his impossible presence. "Where have you been?" The question came out as an accusation, sharp with 10 years of unanswered grief. John glanced at Tommy, who was recording, everything on his phone with the reflexive instinct of his generation. "Put that away, son." "Tommy, go to your room," I said automatically. "Like hell," Tommy replied, his voice cracking with emotion. "My dad just came back from the dead. I'm not going anywhere." John looked at me, some silent communication passing between us. Whatever had kept him away for 10 years was dangerous enough that he didn't want our 15-year-old son to hear it. "Tommy." John's voice carried the authority that had once commanded soldiers in combat. "Please, give your mother and me a few minutes." Reluctantly, Tommy pocketed his phone and headed upstairs, but not before stopping to stare at his father one more time. "You better not disappear again," he said fiercely, "because I won't forgive you twice." When we were alone, John sat heavily at our kitchen table, the same table where I'd cried over government death notifications, where I'd helped Tommy with homework while secretly wondering if I was raising him right without a father, where I'd eaten 10 years of solitary dinners. While staring at his empty chair, "I can't tell you where I've been," he said finally. "But I can tell you why I couldn't come home. There are people, powerful people, who need me to stay dead. If they know I'm alive." A sound outside made him freeze. His hand moved to his hip, where a gun would have been. His entire body went rigid with the hypervigilance of someone who'd lived too long in hostile territory. "John, you're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared." He looked at me with an intensity that made my stomach clench. "Claire, I need you to understand something. The man who left for Afghanistan 10 years ago, that man did die over there. What came back is something else. Someone else." Before I could ask what he meant, the lights went out. The house plunged into darkness so complete I couldn't see my own hands. Outside, I could hear our neighbors' houses humming with electricity. This wasn't a neighborhood blackout. This was targeted. John was moving before I could react, his hand finding mine in the darkness with military precision. "Basement. Now." John, what's happening? They found me. His voice was calm with the terrible composure of someone who'd been expecting this moment. I should have stayed away. I should have let you keep believing I was dead. We fumbled down the basement stairs. In the dark, Tommy's voice calling from upstairs, adding urgency to our descent. John guided me to the far corner, behind the old furnace where we used to hide Christmas presents when Tommy still believed in Santa Claus. Stay here, he whispered. No matter what you hear, don't move. I'm not leaving you again. You never left me. I left you. His hand cupped my face in the darkness, thumb brushing away tears I didn't realize I was crying. I left you because they gave me a choice. Disappear forever or watch my family die. It wasn't really a choice at all. The sound of breaking glass came from upstairs, followed by Tommy's terrified scream. John was moving before the echo faded, taking the basement stairs 3 at a time. I heard voices, cold, professional voices, speaking in the clipped tones of people accustomed to violence. Then gunfire, brief and decisive. Silence. I waited in the darkness for what felt like hours but was probably minutes, listening to the sound of my own heart hammering against my ribs. When I finally crept upstairs, I found John standing over 2 bodies in our living room. They wore black tactical gear and carried weapons I'd only seen in war movies. Tommy was unharmed but shaking, pressed against the far wall like he was trying to disappear into the wallpaper. Pack a bag, John said without looking at me. We have maybe an hour before more arrive. More what? Who are these people? People who want me to stay dead. He was already moving, checking the bodies with professional efficiency. People who will kill anyone who knows I'm alive. John, I deserve an explanation. He stopped then, looking at me with eyes that held depths of pain I couldn't fathom. No, you don't. You deserve a normal life with a husband who comes home from work every day and helps with homework and grows old with you. You don't deserve this. But we were already past deserving. The life I'd built as John Miller's widow was crumbling around me, replaced by something darker and more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. We threw clothes into duffel bags while John explained the basics. His unit had been involved in a classified operation that had gone wrong. He'd seen things, documented things, that certain people needed to stay buried. When he'd tried to report what he'd witnessed, he'd been given an ultimatum: disappear completely, or his family would pay the price. So I disappeared, he said, stuffing cash and fake IDs into a backpack with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. I've been living off the grid for 10 years, moving every few months, always watching to make sure no one connected me to you and Tommy. But you came back. Why now? Because I was dying. The words came out flat, matter of fact. Liver cancer. Stage 4. I had maybe 6 months left, and I couldn't. I couldn't die without seeing you again, without meeting the man my son had become. Tommy looked up from his own frantic packing. Are you still dying? Probably. But that's not the most immediate problem. We left through the back door, using paths through the woods that John seemed to know by heart. He led us to a car hidden in an abandoned barn 3 miles from our house, a nondescript sedan with license plates that probably belonged to someone else. As we drove through the night, John told us the rest of the story. His unit had been deployed to a village in Afghanistan that was supposed to be a Taliban stronghold. But when they'd arrived, they'd found mostly civilians, families who'd been labeled as enemy combatants by intelligence reports that were either wrong or deliberately falsified. The order came down to neutralize all hostiles, John said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. But there weren't any hostiles, just farmers and their families, old men and women, children. What did you do? Tommy asked from the back seat. What I should have done from the beginning. I refused the order, but I was the only one. John's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. My unit. Men I'd served with for years, men I'd trusted with my life. They followed orders, all of them. The silence in the car was deafening. I could feel the weight of what he was telling us, the moral catastrophe that had destroyed not just a village in Afghanistan, but my husband's ability to live in the world. I recorded it, he continued. Everything. I thought if I had evidence, if I could prove what really happened, maybe I could prevent it from happening again. But instead, it made you a target. It made me a dead man. The operation was classified, the village was wiped off the maps, and everyone involved was either killed in combat or transferred to other assignments. Except me. I was the only witness left, and I had video evidence of American soldiers massacring civilians. We drove through the night, stopping only for gas and coffee at truck stops where John paid cash and kept his hat pulled low. I tried to process everything, the impossible return of my dead husband, the revelation that he'd been alive and suffering for 10 years while I'd mourned him, the knowledge that our government had tried to bury him to cover up war crimes. By dawn, we were in a motel outside Denver, huddled in a room that smelled of cigarettes and industrial disinfectant. John had been awake for 36 hours straight, but he couldn't rest. He kept checking the windows, monitoring police scanners, waiting for the hammer to fall. "John," I said gently, "you can't keep running forever. We can't keep running forever." No. He looked at Tommy, who was sleeping fitfully on one of the twin beds. "I never wanted this for him. I never wanted this for you. So what do we do?" John pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Such a small thing to have caused so much destruction. "We go public. We release the video, tell the whole story, and hope that publicity is enough to keep us alive. And if it's not, then at least Tommy will know why his father disappeared. He'll know that some things are worth dying for." The next morning, we drove to the offices of the Denver Post. John had researched investigative journalists who specialized in military cover-ups and government accountability. We walked into the newsroom like refugees seeking asylum, carrying our story and John's evidence like sacred relics. The reporter, Sarah Martinez, listened to our story with the professional skepticism of someone who'd heard a lot of conspiracy theories. But when John showed her the video, 23 minutes of crystal-clear footage showing American soldiers executing civilians while their commanding officers watched, her expression changed completely. "This is," she started, then stopped, rewinding to watch a particular sequence again. "Jesus Christ, this is genuine." "It's why they want me dead," John said simply. "It's why my family's in danger, and it's why the world needs to see it." Sarah looked at us, a man officially dead for 7 years, his wife who'd spent a decade believing she was a widow, and their teenage son who was learning that heroism sometimes meant destroying your own life for the sake of truth. "If I publish this," she said slowly, "you'll never be safe. Not really. There will always be people who want this buried." "And if you don't publish it," John replied, "those people will eventually find us anyway. At least this way, our deaths might mean something." The story broke 3 days later. The video went viral within hours, sparking outrage across social media and cable news. Military officials scrambled to provide context and damage control. Politicians demanded investigations. Foreign governments called for accountability. John Miller, officially dead for 7 years, became the most wanted man in America, wanted by the media for interviews, wanted by the military for court-martial, wanted by various government agencies, for reasons they wouldn't specify, and wanted by unknown parties for reasons that were all too clear. We were in hiding again within a week, this time in a cabin in the Colorado mountains that belonged to Sarah Martinez's ex-husband. The story had made John a folk hero to some and a traitor to others, but it hadn't made us safe. "There's something I need to tell you," John said on our 3rd night in the cabin, while Tommy was outside chopping firewood with the methodical intensity of a teenager trying to process trauma through physical labor. "More secrets? One more. The cancer. It's not as advanced as I told you. I might have years left, not months." I stared at him, not sure whether to laugh or scream. You lied about dying? I lied about how fast I was dying. I wanted you to understand. The coming back wasn't a choice I made lightly. I thought if you knew I was desperate, if you knew I didn't have much time left anyway, you thought I'd forgive you more easily. I thought you'd understand why I was willing to risk everything just to see you again. Outside, Tommy's axe bit into wood with a sharp crack that echoed across the mountains. Inside our borrowed cabin, I sat with the husband I'd mourned, grieved, and finally learned to live without, trying to figure out how to love someone who'd been dead for 10 years. The video, I said finally. How long have you had it? Since the day it happened, 10 years. And you've been carrying this alone all this time. I didn't have a choice. If I'd tried to release it earlier before social media and investigative journalism made cover-ups harder, it would have been buried and forgotten. I needed to wait for the right moment, the right platform. And us? Were we just collateral damage while you waited for your moment? John was quiet for a long time, staring at the fire crackling in the stone fireplace. Every day I stayed away was a choice between your safety and my conscience. I chose your safety. Every single day for 10 years. Until now. Until I realized that staying away forever wasn't actually keeping you safe. They'd been monitoring you, just in case. If I died without releasing the video, they might have decided you knew too much anyway. The revelation hit me like ice water. They've been watching us all this time? The man in black that Tommy saw at school? The surveillance cameras that malfunctioned whenever you tried to investigate my disappearance? The strange phone calls that disconnected when you answered? That wasn't paranoia, Claire. That was them making sure I hadn't tried to make contact. I thought about all the times over the years when I'd felt watched, when I'd had the nagging sensation that my grief was being observed and catalogued. I'd attributed it to my imagination, to the hypervigilance that comes with trauma. I'd been wrong. So coming back wasn't just about seeing us before you died, I said. It was about protecting us. It was about all of it. I missed you every single day. I watched Tommy grow up from a distance, proud and heartbroken in equal measure. I wanted to come home so badly it felt like dying every time I chose not to. But I also knew that eventually my silence wouldn't be enough. Eventually, they'd decide that the risk of leaving witnesses alive was greater than the risk of eliminating them. Tommy came back inside, his face flushed with cold and exertion. He looked between his parents, one who'd spent 10 years believing, herself a widow, one who'd spent 10 years choosing exile over truth, and sat down heavily in front of the fire. So what happens now? He asked. Do we keep running forever? Do we try to go back to normal? What's the plan? John and I looked at each other, two adults who'd been making impossible choices for so long that we'd forgotten how to plan for a future that included happiness. I don't know, John admitted. I never thought I'd live long enough to have to figure that out. The answer came the next morning, delivered by Sarah Martinez's cell phone. The Pentagon's agreed to a full investigation, she told us, her voice crackling through the poor mountain reception. Congressional hearings, independent review board, the works. They're saying that if John agrees to testify, he'll receive full immunity and protection. And if he doesn't? I asked. Then you'll spend the rest of your lives running from people who want to keep this buried. It wasn't really a choice, any, more than John's original decision to disappear had been. But this time, at least, we were making it together. The hearing was held 6 months later in a packed congressional chamber, with cameras broadcasting John's testimony live around the world. He wore his dress uniform, the same one he'd worn to our wedding, now altered to accommodate the weight he'd lost during his years in exile. He told the whole story, the village, the massacre, the cover-up, the choice between silence and family, the 10 years of watching us from the shadows while dying a little more each day. When he finished, the chamber was silent except for the clicking of camera shutters and the soft sound of grown men and women crying. The investigation that followed led to dozens of prosecutions, policy changes, and reforms. John became a whistleblower hero to some, a traitor to others, and a cautionary tale to everyone. We moved to a small town in Montana under assumed names, started a new life with new identities, and the kind of round-the-clock security that comes with being living symbols of institutional accountability. Tommy finished high school and got into college on a scholarship funded by a veterans' rights organization. He wants to be a journalist now, inspired by Sarah Martinez and motivated by the understanding that truth is something worth risking everything. For John's cancer is in remission, thanks to treatment that's possible now that he's officially alive again. We're older than we should be, marked by experiences that aged us in ways that have nothing to do with time. But we're together. Sometimes I catch him staring at Tommy or me with the expression of someone who still can't believe we're real. Who spent so long watching from a distance that proximity feels like a miracle. Do you regret it? I asked him last week, as we sat on our porch watching Tommy practice driving in our gravel driveway. Do you regret coming back? John was quiet for a long time, watching our son navigate the space between our house and the road with the careful attention of someone learning to exist in the world. I regret a lot of things, he said finally. I regret the choices that made disappearing necessary. I regret the 10 years we lost. I regret that Tommy had to grow up without a father. But, I don't regret choosing truth over silence, and I don't regret choosing to come home to you. That night, after Tommy had gone to bed and John was asleep beside me, something I still haven't entirely gotten used to, I lay awake thinking about the mathematics of moral courage. How sometimes the right choice costs everything. How sometimes love means disappearing. How sometimes it means coming back. John had spent 10 years believing that staying away was the only way to keep us safe. But in the end, the only thing that had actually protected us was the truth he'd been carrying all along. The video that had destroyed his life had also saved it. The evidence that had made him a dead man had ultimately made him free. And the wife, who'd spent 10 years mourning him, had become the woman who helped him choose courage over safety, justice over peace, truth over the comfortable lie of his permanent absence. In the morning, I would wake up next to my husband, not the ghost of the man I'd married, not the memory I'd preserved, but the real John Miller, scarred and complicated and alive. We would drink coffee together and read the news and argue about Tommy's curfew and do all the ordinary things that extraordinary circumstances had made impossible. We would live the life that love and truth had finally made possible. But tonight, I just listened to him breathe, steady and real and present, and marveled at the strange mathematics of a love that had survived death, distance, and the kind of choices that usually destroy everything they touch. Outside our bedroom window, security guards patrolled the perimeter of our new life, protecting the family that had been rebuilt from the ashes of a decade-old lie. Inside, 3 people who'd been scattered by forces beyond their control were finally learning how to be together again. It wasn't the life any of us had planned, but it was the life that remained when everything else had been stripped away. Love, truth, and the stubborn insistence that some things are worth any sacrifice to preserve. John stirred in his sleep, reaching for me with the automatic gesture of someone who'd spent too many years sleeping alone. I took his hand, scarred now, missing fingers, marked by experiences I'd never fully understand, and held on tight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new choices between safety and principle. But tonight, we were just a family, sleeping under the same roof, protected by the truth that had once seemed like our greatest enemy. The man who died in Afghanistan 10 years ago was gone forever. But the man who'd chosen to come back to life, despite the cost, was lying beside me now, breathing steadily in the darkness. And that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.